Okay, good morning and good afternoon to everyone that is attending today's webinar. This is our September Wednesday webinar at TimeSolv. I'm Scott Clayson, the Marketing Director, and I will be your host today. We are recording this session, so if you need to duck out of this webinar for whatever reason, I will be sending an email afterwards with a link to the recording. So that if there was something maybe you want to review again, you didn't quite catch something I may have said, you'll always have access to that recording and you'll be able to find the area that you may want to review again. So we're going to go ahead and get started to be respectful of everyone's time. And again, welcome. I'm sitting here in lovely Minneapolis, where for those of you that didn't know, that's where TimeSolv is headquartered, is just down the road from where Thomson Reuters World Headquarters are located. And again, for those of you that may not have known, TimeSolv actually was developed by Thomson Reuters back 18 years ago now, 1999, and was spun off as a separate company in 2006. So it's no surprise or no coincidence that we're just down the road from them. So, okay, the purpose of these webinars, again, just to reiterate for those that have been here before, is that while we send out tips of the week, our tip of the week email on most Monday mornings, yesterday went out obviously on Tuesday because of Labor Day, we know that we could do an even better job with the ongoing education of our product and features that you may have forgotten about since your training, or just plain never knew about. And of course, this is an opportunity to talk about new features that we've introduced since the last Wednesday webinar. You know, we know that attorneys have to complete a lot of CLEs and that sort of thing. So we just sort of try to think of this as your TimeSolv CLE. So we host these the first Wednesday of every month. And our next one will be on Wednesday, October 4th at the same time, 1 o'clock Eastern Time, 12 o'clock Central. And we'll generally cover all of the tip of the week articles from that previous month. So usually around 4 topics or so. Today, actually, we're going to be doing 6 because a couple of them are pretty short topics. But we should be able to get you out of here in about 45 minutes or so, based on the other 2 Wednesday webinars that we've done. Just so you know, from a kind of a housekeeping item, everyone is on mute, so you can't, ask questions verbally, but there will be a Q&A that I'll open up at the end that you can do. You should see in your web browser when you're viewing this, up near the middle top of your screen, a little thought bubble or dialogue bubble, if you will. And if you click on that, that's where you can enter chat questions, and you just type a question and I'll see those chat questions come up. So we will, I'll open that up later on when we get done. And then if there's anything that's really very particular or very granular in detail to the group, we could always take that discussion offline after the webinar and even get support involved if need be. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. I think I did mention that we are recording this. So today's webinar, we are going to be covering several things here. First of all, how you customize the email messages when you're sending your invoices and statements via email. We're going to talk about an update that we made to how you have access to assign matters only for timekeepers. In other words, you only want them to see the matters and clients that you've assigned to them. You don't want them to see any other matters or clients within TimeSolv. So that's a bit of a change as to where that was located before. Then a couple of quick things. We have a new feature that allows you to pay your invoices directly from the Sent Invoice screen. If you haven't noticed that yet, I'll go over it. We also have a faster way for you to view your draft invoices or preview your draft invoices before you send those out. So we'll go over that. We'll talk a little bit about the difference between, just in general, about using task codes on time and expense entries and when you might want to use them, when you may not want to use them, when you may want to use them versus an abbreviation, and so on. So we'll kind of review that a little bit. And then last was our tip of the week from just yesterday, and that is, if you need to, how to set up recurring expenses, something that a lot of people ask us about. because for any particular matter, they might have an ongoing fee. Maybe it's a copying fee that you charge to clients all the time and so on. So we'll show you how to do that. So without further ado, let's talk about tip number 1, how to customize your email messages. So first I'm going to show you what the default message is in an email when you're sending out an invoice or a statement via email, if you haven't seen that before. Then where you can actually edit that firm-wide setting of what you want the message to be in the email that gets sent. Then you can customize it at the client or matter level. I'll show you that. And you can also edit the email message as one last chance at the draft invoice level. So let's dive right in and go to TimeSolv. I'm logged in here. I'm on the time entry screen. So first of all, when you decide that you want to send invoices via email, the default message that comes up, sorry here, let me get back to where I was. Sorry about that. I want to show my taskbar. Why is my taskbar not showing up? Yeah, I'll just do that. So to make it easier, when you send the invoice and you haven't done anything to the email message, here's what the default message says. It'll say, "Dear," and it'll insert the first name of the contact that you have for that matter. "Please see attached invoice. It is a pleasure serving you." And then it'll pull automatically the name of your firm, the address you have, and then your main contact's phone number and email. So in other words, when you're under our account, it's pulling this email address and this phone number along with this address here, okay? So that's what it'll be if you never touch the settings for what you want to be in the actual email when you're sending the invoice. So the first place, if you want to edit that default message to say something a little more interesting, or you want to send them to your website, whatever it might be, is under the client area. So you want to go under Clients and then Settings. And then from there, we have a whole bunch of tabs of the various settings you can have in place for your clients and your matters. What we're interested today is in the invoice narratives. And as you can see, about 2/3 of the way down, we have a box with invoice email message. So this, when you come here for the first time, it'll be blank, it'll be empty. And you'll notice you can pull this down and to reveal and write as much as you'd like. And so I've changed the default email message for our firm, my demo firm here, to say, "Thank you for your business. Please find the attached invoice. If you have any questions, please contact Julie," whatever, the particular person who might handle that. And then I did go ahead and still put in the name of the firm, the address, and I put in my email address. You may also have noticed that when I showed that first email, that by default, any email address is going to automatically turn that email address into a link. Same thing, this question just came up to me the other day, which I didn't know the answer to until I tested it. If you want to put in a web address as well, it'll automatically be turned into a link in the email message itself, okay? So I'm going to ask, I saw we already had a question that came through. I'm going to ask to hold off on the questions till we get to the very end of the entire webinar, only because I may answer your questions during the course of the webinar, and I want to make sure I respect everyone's time. So I'm going to hold off on answering the chat questions until we get to the very end. So getting back to where I was at here, when you put in a web address like this, it will automatically turn into a link in the email that's received, and I'll show you an example of that. Here's an email. This is a Gmail that I'm looking at, and again, it turned that http www.timesolv.com into an actual link to go to the website. And Outlook does the same thing. Again, you saw that with I don't have this is an older email that I have up. I don't have the web address, but it would also be here as well. So that's where you would set the custom message you want to have in your email when you send out your invoices at your firm level, no matter what. So then how can you customize that even further if you'd like? And you can do it at both the client level, like I mentioned, and at the matter level. So you want to go under, clients and matters. I'm going to stay here and say, yes, I want to save my changes. So we're going to go to the clients and matters area and pick any particular client. We'll click on it, and there'll be that same tab you saw under client settings, invoice narratives. Now you click here and it shows you what all your defaults are and what your default invoice message is. And then you just simply click on this gray button that says override, pretty self-evident what to do here. And again, you can pull down this text box and you can then specifically override it for just this client and hit save. Or you can say, I'm going to remove the override and go back to where I was. And then same thing at the matter level. And again, you can access the matters from either this tab here, or we could go back and access it through our list here. So you click on the particular matter you're looking at, you're looking to change the narrative. On the email message, you'll see the same tab, invoice narratives, and you'll see the same override feature if you want to really customize that. And you can set this up well ahead of time when you first create your matter if you'd like, whatever you want to do. So then every invoice that you would ever send out for this particular matter would have whatever is customized in this area, whatever you overrode from the firm settings. And just so you know, even if you changed it at the client level, you would have the ability to then overwrite it at the matter level to make it even more granular. I mean, TimeSolv is kind of hierarchical that way. You have your firm settings, client settings are underneath that. The matter settings are underneath that. If you change anything that's specifically at the matter level, it's going to override anything you did at the client level. Anything you do at the client level is going to override whatever you did at the firm level. So it's an easy kind of rule of thumb in thinking about using TimeSolv. So you do have then one last chance to change the email invoice message if you'd like, and that's when you're viewing your draft invoices. So you'll go under invoices to drafts, and you see I have several drafts created here. And I think my last Wednesday webinar, I talked about how you can edit draft invoices. And it's just good for everyone to always remember you can pretty much edit everything you want to possibly edit on an invoice right here at the draft level without having to go back to your time entry screen, your expense entry screens, whatever it might be, by simply just clicking on the dollar amount that you see listed here under the draft invoices. So you can just click here. Now you have the option to change not only your time expense entries, you can, as I've showed before, you can make adjustments, you can give discounts, but here at the narrative level, and you can see here again is our default narrative. And again, we could change it here as well one last time. So you have from the firm level, your default message, you can customize it at the client level, at the matter level, and even at the specific invoice level, you can customize the message that's going to be delivered via email. Okay? So that pretty much covers everything in how to update. It's fairly simple stuff, pretty straightforward, but I know we get a few questions. Some of the big takeaways is where you can do it, and then I did have the questions about can you insert basically links. And yes, as long as you have, that http:// web address, you'll be able, that'll turn into a link in the email that's sent. Although email providers automatically read that and create it as a hyperlink. Same thing with any email, as you saw. And even as you saw, they even do it for phone numbers as well. When you're at if you noticed, the phone numbers here actually turn into links as well. And this is a mobile-friendly type thing. So when you're reading if you're reading the email on your phone, you could just tap on the phone number, of course, and just call that person Julie directly if you'd like. Okay, so that covers tip number 1 for our webinar today. So let's get into number 2. So this could have gone to the right screen, right? Okay, so tip 2, access to assigned matters feature. That has been moved. And again, to kind of recap why and how this works, have the ability within TimeSolv to limit the matters and clients that your timekeepers see that are only assigned to them. So myself as the administrator here, this dummy name, Scott Laidlaw, I'm the administrator. I have permissions for everything within TimeSolv. So I see every single client and matter I've ever created, or that's ever been created by anybody, I should say, by anyone. As the admin, you're going to be able to see that. However, there is one particular professional we have who he's kind of a contract attorney. I don't use him all the time, you know, whatever it might be. I only, when he is using TimeSolv to track time, I don't want him to see any other client or matter that the firm might be working on for whatever reason. So if you notice, I've only assigned, he only has access to matters that are assigned to him. And let me show you what that looks like in his world. So if I log out as the administrator, now I'm going to log back in as this person, Tony Hill. And you can see his TimeSolv looks much different from me as the administrator. He only has seen time and expense and reports, and that's it. He doesn't see clients. He doesn't see a dashboard. He doesn't see anything. And also you'll notice he doesn't have the ability to choose the timekeeper that he's entering time for. He can only enter time for himself. And when I double click here, excuse me, he only sees the matters and clients that have been assigned to him. He doesn't see anything else within the system. So the privacy level that you can create here is pretty tight. So the question is, where do you do that and what has changed? So previously, I'm going to log back in as the admin here. We had what was not, I think, a wonderful part of this feature. You went under clients and settings, and then under this matter area in our general tab, there was a box that said access assigned matters only. And if you toggled it, that's where then you could assign matters to and clients to whoever you wanted to lock down. Here was the bad part. It did it for the entire firm. For every single timekeeper in the firm, you then had to go and assign the matters to that timekeeper. Not a great thing, maybe too much security, because as you can imagine, if there's a senior partner who should have access to all clients and matters, the next time they went into TimeSolv, they didn't see any clients and matters because nothing had been assigned to them. So we changed the way you're able to do this with a release that we did earlier in August. So now you do it specifically for each timekeeper. You might want to button down and allow them to only see the matters assigned to them. And you go under account to your professionals. You click on the particular professional you're concerned about. And just do Tony Hill in this example. You go under the permissions tab right here, and this is where you now check the box that you only want to allow them access to assign matters only. That's it. Okay. For other people, let's uncheck this box and hit save for him, and we'll see now if we log back in as him, as that's Tony Hill. Now he sees every client and matter within the firm. Okay. So you can do it at individual, but it doesn't affect anybody else now. That's the key change in this update. It only affects Tony Hill. So you can then, the way you assign, again, a quick recap, the way you actually assign matters to professionals, there's two places where you do it. You can do it actually while you're viewing a professional. One of the tabs here is matters. And then you can, oh, I need to actually change his permissions and give him access to assign matters only. There. Once you check that box and you go to matters, now for all the clients and matters in the system, you can come over here and check the boxes of which ones you want to give him access to, and he'll see nothing else. Okay. And if you have a whole list of, a long, huge list of your clients and matters that's much bigger than this, start searching by the matter name or number if you do a numbering system, and find the matter that way. So I'll say, I know it's called grant proposal, whatever it might be. If I could type search, and there it is. I just give him, I can save that assignment then. Okay. The other place where you can assign a matter access to a particular professional is when you're actually viewing the matter itself. So you go into one particular matter, let's just say this one, Best Buy, it's 102-119 versus Vizio. And you go under assignments here. And this is where you could choose what, who do you want to allow access to? You assign access to all the various timekeepers this way. So there's two places you do it, either at the matter level under assignments or under the professional themselves. The good news is now, like I said, the big change is that this doesn't affect any other timekeeper and their ability to see all the matters within your firm or just the ones that you give them access to. Here's another important note. If you were a firm that was using this feature before we did the update in August, by default, every single timekeeper is going to have this permission box checked. So if you don't care if this person, Drew Pearson, he's a partner, he can see everything within the firm, it's fine. If you were using it before, this assign matters access, this will be checked. You just need to simply uncheck it for those people that could view anything and everything they want. If you've never used this feature before, not a problem. You can just start using it the way I described. Go under account, to the professionals, go to permissions, check the box. Then once you've checked the box, you can say, okay, I only want them to have matters, XYZ, access to it. Again, this is a really nice feature for those that use contract attorneys, and you don't want those contract attorneys to be able to see much. You don't want them to really see anything other than what you've asked them to work on, when they're making their time entries. Okay? So that's the big change there. So let's move on to tip 3. Oh, paying invoices directly from the Sent Invoice screen. It's real simple. We have a new icon that will allow you to pay your or record payments right from that screen. So let's show you how it works if you haven't noticed it already. It's a nice little time saver. So before, when you needed to record a payment, you had to go under payments and payment, find the client and matter that you were looking to record the payment for, and go through there, the way that you should know how to record your payments. Now, if you go into, we had a lot of people asking us, I'd love to be able to do it from just the Sent Invoice screen, because I like to have, search for all my sent invoices by a date range, or maybe I stack it by invoice number. And as these payments come in, almost all the checks have a reference to an invoice number, and I can't do that. I can't search for that in the payments area. There's no way to search for an invoice number that then make a payment. So when you're when you're in Sent Invoices now, you may have noticed this little circle with a dollar bill or a currency, if you will, next to where you download it. So you simply click on that icon, and it takes you to the same payments page, but it's already pre-populated the client and matter that you were recording the payment for. So now you go about everything as you did before. You could say, okay, it's a payment. They're paying by check. The check reference, it's number, 1503 is the check number, and the amount for this, how much was that Travis Erickson real estate plat filing? Well, I have a whole bunch here. So let's just say $1,000 payment. He's got a bunch of sent invoices. So it's number 1523, whatever I said there before, $1,000. Hit save. Now I can allocate that payment. So I'm going to hit allocate. Obviously he's got a whole bunch here. I'm going to allocate it specifically to this invoice number 130. I'm going to allocate the full amount, $1,000, and I'm going to say allocate. And I'm going to hit save. And now it's been allocated. And when I go over to my sent invoices, it's going to reflect that invoice number 130 has now been paid. So it's just a little faster way to go about getting to the payment screen. Not earth-shattering change within TimeSolv, but it does save you a few seconds every day when recording those payments and allocating them towards your invoices to see who's paid their invoices and who hasn't. So that's a fast tip. I said there were several that were going to be fast. So You know, not the biggest deal in the world, but it is kind of nice. Okay, so then there's also a new way to view your draft invoices, and I like this one because I'm the one who requested this this feature. You don't have to download a PDF or a Word document or anything else to actually preview your draft invoices anymore. So let's find out how we do that. Again, we released this back a couple of weeks ago. If you use our document storage feature, which we've had for a couple of months now, this icon will look somewhat familiar. If you go under your invoices to drafts, now previously the only way you could preview these invoices was by clicking this download button and actually downloading, you know, a version. So let's go ahead and just kind of walk through how the previous process, which you can still do, obviously, as you see. So I'm downloading, and then I click on it and it's going to open up a new PDF, and now I can review it and see what it looks like and make any changes and so on and so forth. Now you'll notice there is a new icon next to that download button, and that is to preview the invoice, this little magnifying glass. So you simply just click on that icon, that magnifying glass icon, and up pops the dialog window with essentially the PDF of that invoice. So now you can review it right here. You don't have to open up a whole new window and have it, you know, or it's not going to download anything. It's all right here for you to review. If you do want to view it in a bigger separate window, you to this little pop-out icon, this little square with the arrow up and to the right, click on that, and it is going to open up a different window, and there it is as a PDF like before. And then you can, you know, review it in this fashion if you'd like as well. You could even save it, open it. I just opened it up again. Oh yeah, you can open up an Adobe Acrobat, save it as an Acrobat file, do whatever you want with it. Because right now this is a document previewer, so it's not technically a PDF yet. You could save it to a Google Drive if you use that. You could print it, so you can do lots of fun stuff with it. So yeah, a nice little added feature. Again, saving some time in previewing your drafts. So you don't have to download it, then open it, and so on. Just click on the icon, that magnifying glass icon, and away you go. Okay, again, nice little feature, but it's not, you know, earth-shattering stuff here. Okay, let's on to our next tip, and that is, make sure I'm missing, yeah, okay. Using task codes, how and why you should use them or not use them when creating your time and expense entries. So first, we'll answer that question. Should you make task codes required for your time entries? And if you don't do leads billing, that's sort of the answer to the question. If you don't do leads billing, which if you do leads billing, you know all about it. I know there's some law firms actually have never heard of what leads billing is. It's a way to upload. There's a certain formatting process and task codes that have to be included to submit claims to insurance companies. So the leads billing is a big thing. Could you still use task codes if you don't do leads billing? And then I want to talk a little bit about the difference between what a task code is and our description abbreviations, and I'll show you why that sometimes can get confusing for firms. It depends on what you'd like to do as a firm. So let's first talk about task codes. So you go over here to the time entry screen, and you may notice in your TimeSolv, unless you've changed it, if you go under time and settings, down here at the bottom, by default, when you first start with TimeSolv, the task code option and subtask code option are always set as required when you make a time entry. So in other words, no matter what client and matter I'm choosing here, you know, these are required fields that I have to fill out. Now you can set that to be optional, and then you could decide to use them or not use them. Now, why would you choose optional? Why would it be required? Like I said, if you're doing leads billing, you are required to have the task codes on at all times. And I believe you can even set that if you'd like, I could be lying, at the client level. Yes, you can. So if you only do leads billing for some clients and not others, or some matters and not others, you can go under clients to a matter and set the task code as being optional or required at this level too, or in the subtask code not even being displayed. Okay, because there are firms where they don't, they do more than just leads billing, and so they do need to have it on for some clients, but they want it maybe off for other clients. So that answers the question of, should you make that required? It's really up to you as a firm. And if you're doing leads billing, you'll probably do it required. If you know that you're not going to be using task codes for anything but leads billing, but you have lots of other clients, I would set it to optional here, and then make it required for that particular client and matter that needs the leads billing. The other area, you can create your own, well, first of all, let me back up here a little bit. When talking about task codes, when you double click here, you'll notice there's already all these pre-built, these are the ABA official task codes that have to be used for leads billing, and they are hard baked into TimeSolv. They are here already pre-populated as task codes. You can create your own custom task codes. So if you go under Time and Settings, the tabs right next to the General tab, Task Codes and Subtask Codes, you click on them, and you'll see first all of the ABA task codes, but then you can also create your own custom task code. And you would, this is always a big important thing to tell people. You can call this code whatever you want. We could just call it, what do I want to call it? I'll just call it leads, whatever. And then I'm going to say leads pre-work. Whatever you write in the description is what gets populated when you search in the time entry screen. Okay, and I'll show you what that means. So when I go under time entry here and I start typing leads, it's coming up with the description, the whole description, lead/pre-work, not just that code. And kind of an important distinction. So there's lots of reasons why you might want to use task codes even if you don't want to do leads billing, and that's because you can run reports in TimeSolv with a task summary. So if you create a custom task code for something that all your professionals do, or you want to see how much time is spent on a particular task, you could create either a custom task code or just use one of the ABA ones. You want to know how many hours do we spend as a firm doing asset disposition every month or for a year, whatever it might be. And that's, or for one particular professional. You can always do that by running a report. So you go into Reports to Task Summary, and you want to see, I want to see for Scott Laidlaw, for every client he's worked on, how often does he do asset, how many hours, give me a date range or whatever, and then output that report. So it is a good way if you're a firm that is really dialed into wanting to get a good view of like how much time are your timekeepers spending on any particular task. Use the task code field. If there isn't an ABA one that fills your needs, create your own custom one. Okay, so you can do lots of things with it, because then you can run these reports and really give you a really interesting view of where your firm's time is being spent and what % of their time is being spent doing, whatever the task code is you've designated that you're interested in. You might have noticed when I entered a task code here, it automatically populated in the description field. So some people have been using this as a way to write their descriptions. They'll create a custom task code, and let's create one, and I'll show you kind of how that looks. So if I create a new task code, and I'm going to call it conference call with client to discuss matter. That's the description. Okay, I'm going to hit save. Then when I go under time entry and I find that task code, I'm going to just start typing conference call with client to discuss matter. It's hey, it's populated my description. That's great, fantastic. Away we go. There is a faster way. Well, first of all, if you don't want, I should step back here. If you don't want this task code to automatically fill this description text box, which a lot of people wouldn't necessarily want, you would do that under Time, Settings. Then right here where it says Set Time Entry Description, You uncheck that box. And again, by default, box is checked. So then you hit save, go back to your time entries. And now when I type in that conference, does not populate in this description box. If you're interested in making sure that you're using like common language and you're using descriptions and tasks, you know, everyone's using the same language, we highly recommend at TimeSolv you use the custom abbreviations you can create to make things a little faster. And abbreviations, if you're not aware of them, you can create custom abbreviations for your firm under your account settings. You have an abbreviations tab, and you can create whatever length abbreviations you'd like that would be entered in the description field simply by using these short codes that you create. You decide what they're going to be. So we know CC is conference call to discuss matter, CC space, and there it is. Okay. Now, one thing that we've found over the years for many, you know, everyone's human, they don't necessarily memorize all of their abbreviations. We always have the little cheat sheet over here where if you hover over that icon there, you'll be able to see all the abbreviations for your firm. You can also create personal abbreviations by timekeeper. So again, you go under Account Professionals, choose a particular professional, and they have an abbreviation tab as well. And you can see it populates all the firm abbreviations, and here's where you can create personal abbreviations that only Tony Hill would have access to when he's logged in. So we recommend that if you're more interested in quickly filling out the description field, don't use task codes. Use the custom abbreviations. If you are very interested in tracking what type of things your timekeepers are working on over a certain period of time, then I would say create custom task codes or use the ABA task codes, because then you'll be able to run the reports. Now, if you want to, you know, and if that's fine, you just want to always have your task codes be inserted into the description field that will show up on the invoice. Obviously, you can certainly do that. You just, like what you showed, go under time settings, and then you go ahead and check that box. And then getting back up to the top of what we talked about, should you make your task codes and your subtask codes required or optional? And you can do it at the firm level as required or optional under that timer settings, and then you can also do it at the client and matter level as well. So for those that do that leads billing or whatever it might be, you can decide when you want to use task codes as a mandatory thing when creating a time entry. Expense entries are a little different. That's always optional. You do have expense codes. They're always optional in TimeSolv. There is no required, not required. It's only on the time entries. Okay, so hope that was clear to everybody. We'll move on now to our last tip of the day or of the week that we did just yesterday, and that is setting up recurring expenses. First of all, you need to enable this feature, and we'll show you where. And then we'll show you how to create those recurring expenses. Fairly straightforward, but there are some things you should be aware of. So recurring expenses, these are things like copying fees, you know, I suppose fax fees you wouldn't really use those anymore. Maybe an IT fee, an general admin fee that you charge for all of your, you know, for various matters, or maybe you only charge it to some matters and not others. You first want to go under Expense and Settings. And in the General setting, there is a box that you toggle to enable recurring expenses. Right now it was already toggled, and you notice when I had it toggled, it showed me recurring expense here in the drop-down menu. If I untoggle that box and hit Save, you'll see it's no longer there. So you want to go ahead and make sure it's enabled, which I don't believe by default it is enabled, so you do have to go ahead and enable it if you want to set up a recurring expense. You go then under Expense, click on Recurring Expenses, and then you would click on New Recurring Expense, Renew Recurring Expense. And you can do it by professional, you don't have to. You do need to choose the particular matter that you want to have a recurring expense be assigned to. You don't have to use an expense code, but you can. And here's where you would put in either the price per unit, the percent markup, the fixed amount. Then here's a big thing too. Decide how frequently this will be charged. If you're only doing a 5% markup, let's say, on a monthly invoice, then you would just say do it monthly. You could even do a, $5 a day fixed amount that for the pleasure of being, having me as your lawyer, I'm going to charge you $5 a day daily. And by the end of the month, when you create your draft invoice, it would automatically put in 30 expense entries or 31, depending on the month, that had, a $5 expense entry every single day. So you can change it to weekly, monthly, annually, or just you can stop it altogether. You can stop it and still keep it, and not actually delete it. And then by default, it always will start on the next working business day, because it will automatically calculate that expense entry like at midnight every night. So then the next time, if you have a recurring expense entry, the next time you create a draft invoice, it would automatically place that draft invoice, automatically place those expense entries on the draft invoice that are recurring. So it's at the matter level. So that's kind of one thing that, you can use this in various ways. If you only want to charge like a flat fee, you could even use it just a flat expense entry fee that you're going to just do once a month, run the draft invoice for that matter. You've already set the fixed amount to $1,000, whatever it might be, run your draft invoices and boom, it would show up. If you want to add a percent, there are some other ways around that. In fact, somebody emailed me about that this morning. They want to add a 5% just general admin fee. It covers all IT costs, copying, all that, whatever it might be. How would you apply that across the board to every single person's invoice, not just a particular matter? And that can be done in a little bit of a different place that I'll run over right now. If you go under Account to Settings, you'll see right here, by default, I was playing with this earlier, by default, that's your tax label. If you're a firm that charges tax or has to charge tax, you don't have to keep this label with the word tax label. As you can see, I had changed it before. You can say, this is my admin fee. Hit save. Now it changes that label across the board everywhere. There's your admin fee label. Now, where do you set that fee? Where you do it is under both time settings and expense settings. So for time settings, it's showing, it says time admin fee rate. I can say I want it to be 5%, 4%, whatever it might be. And then same thing with your expense settings. You could say I want it to be, 4%. So now every single invoice that you create that has time and expense entries, there's going to be an additional, this says tax rate still. It should actually say admin fee, not tax. You can also change that, I believe, at the client level. You could say taxable status, even though we know it's an admin, you could say not taxable or taxable. And then you can see it already inserted my automatic admin fees of 4%, and I could override those if I so wanted to for a particular client. You can stick it to them a little bit more for an admin fee, let's say, or IT costs. Whatever you want that label to be, you can make it be whatever you want. But that would be a way to create a firm-wide percent fee that's added on to every invoice. By default, it's called a tax label because that's a general thing, but you could make it anything that you want it to be. You could call it IT, you could call it admin, whatever you want it to be. So I hope that makes sense. A little different than the recurring expense. Setting up the recurring expenses for a particular matter that you're going to have recurring expenses that will need to be placed on the draft invoice every single month. Okay? So I hope that's clear for everybody. Well, we run up about 45 minutes right now. I know that there was a question near the beginning, so I'm going to take a look at it. Can you customize the subject line when using the invoice email feature? That's a really good question. As far as I know, no. I know that was a question that has come up, that you cannot customize that subject line, which I think would be a great thing. However, it is not something that'll just say invoice number for, the name of the client, the name of the matter. So super good question. And no, there's no cost for associated in emailing the invoice. And I wasn't aware that that was even something years ago. I haven't been, I guess, here long enough. no additional fee in us emailing that invoice. The only additional fee when it comes to sending invoices that we would charge you for if you chose to use it is this third option of auto mail, in which we will actually mail the invoice for you. We will print it out, stuff it in an envelope, lick the stamp, and send it to your client for you. And that's like $1.48 or $1.49 per invoice. So I have that turned off in my settings here, my invoice settings, but you could turn that on and do that. That's the only time that there is an additional charge for the way you send your invoice. For email, no, not at all. So are there any other questions? Going back to a lot of things that we covered today. I know we covered a lot of stuff. If you have any questions, again, use that little thought bubble or dialogue bubble up at the top and ask away. I will give you all a minute or two here to come up with your fabulous, wonderful, insightful questions about the things that we covered. Hopefully I did a good enough job where nobody has any questions, but we'll see. So somebody's asking, they say, we copy our billing responsibles when we send out invoices. Is there a way to do that if emailing through the system? Yes, so kind of like basically the CCing of who, you know, the emailing the invoices. I believe, and I'll double check this and I will send an email out to everyone, but I believe it's only going to CC, actually, let me hold on a quick second and I could have that question answered. Everyone just holds tight here a second. I'm going to find that out because I believe there is a way that the CC only is going to be to the, I'm almost positive, the under our account, it's going to be this email address and this email address only, unfortunately. I'm pretty sure that's the answer, but I'll make sure. Okay, next question. Is there a way to generate an accounts receivable report that excludes expenses? This is getting into a little different area than what we talked about. And I apologize since I'm not on the support staff that would be a question. Let's go over and go to the accounts receivable. I didn't realize that there was a way. Looks like no, there's not, from what I can tell. You could always email support@timesolv.com to confirm that, but it doesn't look like there is a way to exclude the expenses from the accounts receivable report. How do you create a client statement of account? It does not appear as an option under reports. Yeah, that's actually under invoices and then statements. So the question is, how do I create a statement of account that could be sent out? So you go under invoices, statements, and then you can create a new statement based on various criteria. You could do it for all clients, for your matters only. You could choose a particular client, include any that have zero balances. If you'd like, just show them they have a zero balance. This current balance for this particular client is Medtronic, and then you can't, I see we don't have the option to email, which that could be because I don't have it set for that client, but I want to double check that. I thought you could email the statements as well, and not just have them be downloaded. Let me try another one or all. I thought that you could do it for everyone. Or you could email. Yeah, okay. So some of these you can email, and that's based on the particular settings you have for that client, which would be if you go to that client and you should be, as long as you have, yeah, you have to have a contact associated with it, which I may not have for all of mine. But that's how you create those clients of account. Or excuse me, that's how you create the statement of account. So under invoices, then statements. And that's where you create them. And you can include zero balances if you'd like. Okay, so for invoices drafts, is there a way to make the text larger? The only way to make the text larger on an invoice or a draft is to download it as a Word document, and then you can mess with the font size to your heart's content. That's the only way to change the font size. Our developers, you know, the way it's cobbling together an invoice, they had to use a set font size, and the way it's been explained to me, it got too overly complicated to format the invoices if we allowed users to change the font size. And so the workaround is download the invoice as either a Word document or an Excel document, one of the two. Then you can open them up and change the font size and change the font style as well. If you really feel like you need to send your invoices with Comic Sans fonts or whatever it might be, you can do that. Of course, the downside of that is you have to do that for each individual invoice, which is not optimal. But that's the limitations that we have right now. Rather than limiting a timekeeper to certain matters, can you limit the matter to only certain timekeepers? If we want to set up a matter that is confidential to only TimeSolv admins, is there a way to do that? Yeah, basically you would then want to, if you didn't assign any matter to anybody, so if you went under clients and matters and clicked on a particular matter and under assignments, now this would have to be, and again, I can unclick everybody, so nobody's assigned to it. So now you'd have to make sure that all your professionals have it set that in their permissions that they have access to assign matters only. If you have that set for all of your timekeepers, then yes, the only people who would see that client and matter would be the admins. No other timekeepers would do that. Because basically you could come in, every single timekeeper would have this box checked, you'd go to matters, and for that particular client and name, they wouldn't be assigned to it until you assign them to it. So I hope that makes sense. But yeah, that is the way you would do it so that only admins could see it. Any other questions? These are all good questions. I'm going to double check on the, I'm still double checking on the who gets CC'd on the emails. So hold on just a quick second. You can listen to me as I'm typing. I can't type and talk at the same time. I am 99% sure that that's the correct answer. It's only the only person who can get CC'd is under the email address that you have under our account, the main account info. But I will double check that. I'm double checking right now. I'm hoping to get an answer here before we sign off. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, like I mentioned. Any other questions that I haven't been able to answer yet? Again, on that accounts receivable report, that would exclude your expenses. It looks like it's not by default. Double check at support@timesolv.com. The one workaround would be you could download an accounts receivable report in Excel, or a CSV file, I should say, and then just delete out all of the expenses if you don't want them included in the AR. Would be the workaround I would suggest. Well, I'm not getting a good an answer immediately here, and I don't want to leave everyone else hanging. So I'm going to follow up with an email, which I do anyway, to give you the link to this recording, and I will make sure that that question is answered about who gets included, because this person asked, again, the person who's billing responsible, when they send out the invoices, they get copied on that. Is there a way for them to be CC'd on that email so that the responsible attorney knows that the invoice has been sent? And I will double check on that and get the answer and put it in the email. So unless there's any other questions for today's Wednesday webinar, I want to thank you all for joining me. I'll send out a link to the recording and answer to that question, and I will have the registration for our next Wednesday webinar, which will be Wednesday, October 4th, up and ready to roll probably hopefully by the end of the day today, although not 100% sure. For sure by tomorrow, where you can register for next month's webinar. So thanks everybody. Have a great day and happy billing to you. Thanks everyone.